Hello and welcome to The Magic in You, where I am here with Karagan Griffith, who is an initiate and a priest of the Alexandrian Tradition of Witchcraft, and also the author of this Inner Circle, a discourse about the Alexandrian Tradition of Witchcraft. So welcome, Karagan. If I just bring you onto the screen now, thank you for taking time out for our discussions.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. This is always a thrill to talk to you, Francis. It's really, really wonderful.
Thank you very much for that. So, why don't we dive into some questions, especially for our members of the audience who may not know much about you and what
Yes.
you've been up to in your path. So, how would you describe your current path, or what do you do? I know I've introduced you as a priest and initiate of the Alexandrian Tradition of Witchcraft. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, what it means to you?
So I am an initiate first because that's when you enter the tradition or the practice, that's how you enter it. You are you go through an initiation. So that's the first thing that I think that it's good to go for and call yourself because you went through a rite of initiation. So I'm an initiate. I've been through the rites of initiation of the Alexandrian tradition. Therefore, I'm an Alexandrian initiate. That's what it means. I'm also a priest, and for me, I think that it's a little different from being an initiate. A priest is also an initiate, but it is an active member of either a coven or somebody that it's actively doing the craft. There are many people who were initiated who were not active at all. They just did an initiation and that was it, and they stayed healed for many, many years. So that cannot be a priest or a priestess. In this case, I was always a priest because I was always active. For me, a priest means or refers to the office of the circle, and that an active office. And that is why I say that I'm also a priest of the Alexandrian tradition. And also, I am the high priest of my coven, which is a title that it's ceremonial that refers to my ability or competencies within a group of witches, which is a coven. And that is the coven of Tomar, Portugal, and I am the high priest of that coven. So, yes, I like to call myself an initiate of the Alexandrian tradition, a priest, and also a high priest of the coven.
Thank you very much for that, because I think sometimes these words and labels, people get caught up in so much, and there's lots of interpretations of them, and
Yeah,
it's really good to sort of have like a sort of a line in the sand as to what they actually mean, especially from people from the outside looking in.
right,
So you
right.
did mention that you are a high priest of a coven in Portugal. So how did you start off on your magical journey? Because Portugal, as far as I'm aware, is, can I say, a heavily sort of Catholic country. They may not be sort of looking favorably on witchcraft as such. But so how did you start off on your magical journey?
Well, I have 3 degrees from college, and one of them is in theater. And I was a professional actress for many, many years. And in one of the plays during a rehearsal, one of my colleagues said, I really, really need some help with something. I don't remember what it was. And she says, well, but you know that the old gods can help you. And that struck me like really like a ton of bricks on top of me. And I was like, what do you mean the old gods? And then she went on to say, well, the old gods still exist, and this and this and this and this, and there is this and there is that. And I was fascinated by it because so it was just as casual as this. It was not really a big story. It was just in the middle of a rehearsal, probably in the intermission of something, that we talked about it. And she showed me then a store in Lisbon that was at the time the only esoterical occult store that was in there. And I went there and I said, I want everything you have on Wicca. And she says, everything, yes, every single book you have on Wicca. So I start to read. And then, of course, stores often are points of connection between people and communities and things like that. So that was not an exception. That was a point of meeting. And I met a wonderful lady called Isabel. She's still active, probably somewhere. And she was a high priestess as well, and her husband, and all of that. And then I began to be involved with them and with their work. So they were doing pagan rituals, they were doing Earth Day, and all of those things. So I began to very involved in that. But as a non-initiate, so I always was very, very into Wicca. That for me, traditional Wicca, not really the other Wicca. So a very pulling onto towards not Gardnerian for that matter. I mean, that was very, very clear for me from the beginning. It was Alexandrian. It was not Gardnerian. She actually made a little bit of fun with me. She had a little joke, I know you like Alexanders and da da da. I said, yes, I do. I mean, I really do. And then I began to seriously think about getting an initiation. She couldn't give it to me because she was not Alexandrian, and that was what I wanted. And from then on, I just then contacted, I had a podcast like you do. It was called the Witchcrafting Podcast. That was my first podcast that I did. And then I did Witch Talk after that. And then after the Witch Talk, I began to do On the Black Chair. And then after that, this one, which is for Coven's sake. So Witchcrafting Podcast was really interesting because I saw this book in the internet by an author that was actually Alexandrian. And I thought, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity to actually talk with an Alexandrian because I have not talked to an Alexandrian. I had contacts with emails and things, but really talking in person. And that was Jamal Di Fiosa. So, and that was the voice in the forest. And I actually talked to him and interviewed him, and he was really, really lovely. And then I said to him, what can I do to be initiated in the Alexandrian tradition? And then he says, well, come on over and we'll see how it goes. And I did. And then I was initiated, and that was that. And from that point on, after my initiation, I was always active. So I never stopped. I always had either integrated a group or I had a group of my own. So I was always a priest.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much for
that's my.
no, thank you very much for sharing. And it's interesting that you mentioned Jamal because I was going to mention later, but I might as well bring it up now. It's a nice little segue. This is probably the book that you
That is
read
the
a bit.
book, yes.
And
Yes.
because I wanted to bring this up because not only have you written your own book, but
Yes.
you've over the years you've mentioned your podcast, but you've also produced CDs of chants.
Yeah, I did. Yes, I did.
So this is,
Yeah.
but also with Jamal's book, you redid the cover and of this edition, which is the latest
I'm going to
edition, has
tell
been
you a
expanded.
secret. I'm going
Oh,
to tell you a secret, Francis. Guess who's in that cover? It's me. That's me.
oh, thank you. Oh, that's Alex.
That's me. Yes, yes, yes.
So you're the voice
Posing.
in the forest.
Yes. And that forest, it's actually a beautiful forest that we have here in Tomar that you can actually go to. And I do walks in that fabulous forest. And we took that photograph, and it was really quick. It had to be quick. And it was Jamal who took the photograph, and I had the cape in a bag and the mask. And I was like, let's just, because there are people coming and going. So we took a picture very quickly. And that was what is in there. So that's a little story about that cover.
Yes, wonderful. So while we're talking about books, why don't we just jump right into the Inner Circle, which is your book. It's recently came out last year. And so it's wonderful sort of an insight without giving away too much oathbound. This is how I read my books. I have tags on it through. There's pictures all the way through it as well. So what inspired you to, I mean, you've been doing podcasts, cover designs. What inspired you to actually sit down and write a book, especially about the Alexandrian tradition?
I I have many inspiring books. People say, "Oh, there's no books about the Alexandrian tradition." Actually, they are. There are a couple of them. One of them, well, Jamal wrote only books, not only about the Alexandrian tradition, but majority of books that he wrote was about the Alexandrian tradition. But I've always thought that there was a need for, a book that could tell the seeker or make the seeker aware of the flavor or the tone that the Alexandrian tradition has. And there was only one book like that before this one. And I think that it's a fabulous book that I always refer to, which is What Witches Do by Stuart Farrer. That came out in 1971. And since 1971, there was not one book that could actually really systematically talk about the points that are necessary for a seeker to know so that they will be reasonably, knowledgeable about what the Alexandrian tradition is without giving anything up in terms of oath-bound things. And we do have, very little secrets. We don't really have a lot of them, but we do have some. And so it was quite the challenge to actually talk about these things and moving around things that we couldn't talk about. And one of them is the great rite that I talk about, which is a very sacred rite that we don't talk about much. And so you rely on the history of it, basically, and you talk about polarity and what that means. And so that was what inspired me. I wanted to do not a What Witches Do. I didn't want it to copy Stuart. It's impossible to copy somebody that has the ability that Stuart Farrer had. But I wanted to add for the modern seeker something that was not too big, that was accessible to everyone. So I did it in Portuguese and in English. And that could be something that was a reference to the people that wanted to know a little bit more about the Alexandrian tradition and perhaps even decide to, join the Alexandrian tradition or just be seeking actively after reading the book. So it's not a propaganda book, but it's more of an inside look, but more systematized than What Witches Do. What Witches Do, it's almost like a diary of the practices of the coven. And it's really brilliantly written by Stuart. Mine is a little bit more of a personal experience recount and look into some of the key points on the Alexandrian tradition. So that's what inspired me. It was like the necessity to bring the modern view of a modern practitioner of the Alexandrian tradition in the 2000s, right? To actually talk about it. So that was it.
Yes, and one point that I like that you've covered on, and this is something a bit of a hot topic, especially in today's world where we as in the collective are sort of like expanding the concept of gender and gentrification. There's a lot of sort of like pushback or criticism against sort of more traditional, say, magical traditions like Alexandrian or Gardnerian witchcraft, that they may be against homosexuals or transgendered people, or and you've sort of, I feel that you've sort of explained why polarity, especially if you're talking about the Great Rite, but more than it goes beyond our labels that we call, we use ourselves as well. So it's sort of, as you said, brings it up to date too for the modern discussions that are happening around us today.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
thank you for being brave enough to sort of put those sort of very sort of controversial subjects out there and sharing your views on them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this sort of because you've been a priest and an initiate for a while now, and no doubt because you've been so involved in it, I'm assuming it would have shaped your path, like shaped your normal life outside the craft. How would you explain to somebody as to how it has shaped your life for the better, for the worse, for the indifferent? your perceptions on everything? How does it shape you?
Well, it does shape you inevitably because if you are living it, it has to shape it. There's no other way to address this. And it has to shape it. What really is interesting here with that question, that it's a fantastic question, is to how do you go in the mundane and how does that reflect, for instance, in the mundane? um, of your activities in the mundane, which could be very, non-magical. And it does because, especially I was talking in WitchCon yesterday about this, and I think it was Levi Rowland who actually had a fabulous book as well. And he said he's a high priest of the Alexandrian tradition, and he asked me, how do you feel that the path of the Alexandrian tradition will, intertwine with solitary work, for instance, how would and it's very interesting because it actually, I think that these are connected. The Alexandrian tradition is a path that actually is very formative of the individual. There is a preoccupation in Alex and Maxine to develop the initiate, to actually have give the opportunity for the initiate through training and practice and experience in the circle to develop themselves spiritually, and also in other aspects of the self, like consciousness. So it does really resonate outside. So when you go into the world, those three pillars that I talked about yesterday, and I talked about, it was beauty, and beauty is one of them, the things that really is interesting. We do have that in our practices in the circle, as you know, but because we like beautiful altars and we like to put things like, so, but there's a magical reason for that. And also, how you talk to people, how you conduct yourself in the world, that is outside. So that actually goes and sips outside, which is wonderful. How you listening to people, for instance, and their hour of need, for instance, they don't need to know that you're a priest or a priestess. They want an ear to listen to them, and you can be a very good one. So I think that consciousness is one of the things that I think that gives us the opportunity to be the priest without saying that we're the priest. But I think that it forms the individual in a way that really makes you a better person. And because of that, when you conduct yourself in the world, in the mundane, as we call it, and any activity that you can do, you will be that. You will always be that better person, that person that it's consciousness, that it's aware of the environment, aware of others. And you just help them, or you just lend your hand whenever necessary without doing like, oh, you know that I'm a priest. Or, you don't need to say anything. You just do it. So I think that it betters the individual. I think that that's a very good way to put it. And that will actually reflect in the world.
No, no. And it's sort of like, instead of like being just say a priest or initiate on certain days of the week or certain times of the year, like for when the seasonal rites or during the moons and whatever, you're living it and it begins to become part of your life as well.
Yes,
So it goes
yes, yes.
beyond more than just say a religion or a belief. It incorporates you and how basically how everything around you is shaped as well.
There's a friend that really doesn't believe that any of this is a religion, that Wicca is not a religion. And I disagree with him, of course, because I understand the word religion and how does that, translates into the relationship that we have with the gods, religare, to connect. But I do understand also that much of this is the fundamental thing about his disagreement is because he thinks that we still have a very Catholic Christian thought about all of this, that it's actually separated from our religious peace is separated from our mundane life, which is a very Christian way of thinking, and especially Catholic way of thinking. I'm going on Sundays, and that's that. And then I did my duty. I did what I had to do to be to be good with my own consciousness. So I kind of like went there, I did my thing, and now I just, I can be a bad person again. So and ignore all of the other, the poor, the needy, So that's a very, and I am seeing this more and more in the craft, unfortunately. People are, oh, I have, that Sabbath, or I'm going to the Sabbaths, and I'm going to, and then there is a disconnecting from, their own way of going into the world. This is supposed to make you evolve, not,
Mm.
go backwards. So it's supposed to transform you in a way that you're becoming a better person. So if that happens, and if that is what is happening, then you will carry that to the world. If not, well, I think you're behaving like a Christian, and you
Oh,
shouldn't, because you're not really a Christian. So, to separate yourself from that is really not something that we want to do. We want
mm,
it to be integrated in your own self and your own being and how you behave towards the others. And that's what really is a transformative experience and a connection with divinity, I think. Yeah.
mm, mm. And it's also good to, so if we hear something like what you've just said and it sort of raises up our shekels a little bit, it's good to sort of like to in just sit and wondering why we're sort of affected by it, and then look at our own practice and see where we are actually at, really, I guess, too. And I think that's one
Right.
of the differences between, I mean, there's so many different interpretations of witchcraft Wicca these days, but
Mm.
it's, to me, it's almost like a lot of it is sort of superficial, or as you said, we do it on Sundays and we sort of avoid, and this is one of the things that attracted me in particular to the Alexandrian tradition, is a lot of sort of self work. You begin to really get to know yourself, the good, the
Yeah,
bad,
that's right.
and
That's right.
everything
Mm.
else that's in between.
Yeah.
So talking about that, how has your path supported you, especially say if you've gone through any sort of what they call dark nights of the soul or anything like that? How has the path supported you in such situations? Is there anything you'd like to share?
Well, that's a very interesting question. People really do look at these religious paths as support mechanisms, sometimes over their own difficult periods of time in life. But I don't agree with that, Francis, at all. I think that our path is not a therapeutic path. I don't think that we are doing therapy in groups, and we shouldn't be doing therapy in groups. We shouldn't be doing any support of anything in groups. I think that the craft is a workplace. You go in, you worship the gods, you do your work, done, and that's that. I think that what that does, and go back again into the other question and the answer that I gave, is that it gives you tools to be a person that it's resistant, that it's actually somebody that can solve and be with yourself and kind of go beyond the difficulty and understanding where the difficulty comes from so that you can resolve consciously what is actually wrong or to right whatever is actually wrong. So I think that the path gives you ability to actually and tools to actually resolve your own dark night of the soul, if you want to call it that. But, I think that it gives you that ability, that consciousness of self and of consciousness of place, of where you are and what the circumstance is, so that you can actually resolve it by yourself. I don't feel that I ever personally went to the coven and said, this and this happened to me, please help me, or support me or whatever it is. I think that we're initiates for a reason. Not everyone should be initiated. That is my opinion because not everyone needs to be. And I think that those who are special because they are people. They're people that have the potential to actually be of the priesthood. That's a very special place to be, I think. And because of that, we can help others in terms of listening to them. Sometimes we have requests for healing, things like that. And I think that is very important. But what I think is, in terms of personally, I don't think that anyone should be looking at the craft as a support system at all. They have their support system. They have their therapists and people that are actually specializing these kind of things. There are actually
Mm.
technicians of these things, and I think that that's we I think we just have to leave the therapy to those people, and just use them, but not in the coven. I don't think, or the craft. I don't think that that is it. But it has helped me to believe, if you like, if you believe in magic, if you believe that you are in connection, if you believe that, and if you know exactly why, and you know that you are connected to the divine force, then it does help you. But it isn't the group, it's you. It's your
Mm.
consciousness, it's your development spiritually that you are actually able to do that. You are, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the craft makes you really, strong. And sometimes, when times that are not so happy come about, you are strong enough to overcome them. But you will overcome them, and you will look at them just like we do with things in the craft, which is, we are here to go through experiences that will teach us lessons, and some people do not learn them. And we are aware and conscious enough to know that that is the moment when you stop and you think, what's the learning here? And then we can actually go beyond it. So if we have these dark night of the souls or difficulties and things like that, I think that what we do is that we have this very big awareness of that's the lesson. Let's learn what is there to be learned.
Yes, it sort of like pushes the onus back on self-responsibility
Yes,
as well.
yes, yes,
This is
yeah.
fantastic. You did mention at the beginning that when you were sort of like on the early stages of your path, that you went to this bookshop and there's this automatic or this initial drawing to the Alexandrian tradition as opposed to any other tradition or even Wicca in general. And there are probably not a good time to go into a debate about Wicca these days, but I would say the Alexandrian witchcraft tradition, which some people still call Wicca, and Scott Cunningham's 80s that everybody else sort of sees as Wicca. So why did you know that it was the Alexandrian tradition for you? Was there something about the tradition that sort of stood out, or it's very similar to the Gardnerian, but it sounds like you made a beeline to the Alexandrian. Why was
Hmm.
that?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that you asked that because I'm going to answer for a couple of people that actually came to me and said, this is what actually happened to me when I decided to be an Alexandrian. And the same exact thing happened to me. So I think that this is something that it's recurrent that actually happens to a lot of people. When there is a lot of photographs available to you in the internet about Alex and Maxine and also about the Gardnerians, right? So Gardnerian witchcraft. And I was adamant that it had to be traditional Wicca. I didn't want it anything else. So what I mean by traditional Wicca is the first Wicca or the Wicca that came up in the 40s, which is the Gardnerian one, and then later on the 60s with Alex and Maxine, Alexander. So what I'm saying is that I wanted that. I didn't want it anything else. And when I looked at the photographs, and I looked at Gardner's photographs, those of the Museum of Witchcraft, things like that he poses and da da da. And then other people like, fabulous photographs of Patricia Crowder, these things, and Doreen, and da 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 da. When I looked at Alex and Maxine's photographs, I saw magic. And I'm sorry to say, I didn't see it in the other ones. So when I did that, when I looked at them and I said, I want to be part of that. I want to be in that particular thing. I don't want to be on that one. So I immediately saw a connection through magic, through the photograph or the instant of that, and that's for you, the magic of Alex and Maxine Sanders. They even have still today, decades after, they still sip magic out of photographs in the internet. And it's just incredible how does that, work in terms of go through decades. So I saw the magic and I wanted to be part of it. That's my answer.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing. And I'm quite sure people will be running off to the internet to have a look at these two photos, or the photos from the Gardnerians and the Alexandrians. We're not saying that the Gardnerians don't do magic. It's just what was
No,
depicted in those
I
photos as
didn't see
well.
it. Yes.
So
Yeah.
we're getting to sort of like come to the end of our time. So I'm just wondering, what advice would you have for the seeker? Now, you did mention, you updated, you did I should rephrase that. You do still recommend Stuart Farrar's What Witches Do, and now you've got a new offering as well, so for the modern seeker as well, in your book at the Inner Circle. But what
Mhm.
other advice would you offer a seeker?
Seek as much as you can. Not forever, because then it becomes stale. Your will becomes stale. So seek, 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 seek. You have to go. One of the things that I do when people come to me is the first thing that I do when they ask, oh, I would love to, first thing I do is to send them away. No, go and seek other. And if you have the will to come back, then we'll consider it. But because I think that people need to be absolutely sure if that's what they want and this is what they want. This is not an easy path, and it is one that requires from the individual a lot of work in the circle. It's natural. It comes natural to you if you are in the right place, but you need to know if it is, it's not an effort. It's not anything like that. When I say work means, you have to be involved actively in this, training and things like that. But it is, when people sometimes say to me, I worked very hard. Well, if you worked very hard, then it's not what it should have been, because, you shouldn't be working hard in the craft. You should just, it comes to you, evolve, you go through it, you just navigate it, and shouldn't be hard work at all. But it is work, and you do have, so it's not really for everyone. There are people who really do not have that in them. And that's fine. That's totally fine. There are other options. In the Alexandrian tradition, I think that what I do and how I was taught is really there's a lot of involvement of your time and of yourself in it, and because you asked to be part of it. So now if you asked, and now if you're accepted, now you have to do the work. And it's for you. It's not for anybody else. It's for you. It's for you. Once again, we'll go back to all of the answers that I gave before. It's for you to have that ability, that evolution, that better person that you need to be, and if you really want that, that's what I call vocation. Something that you can't not explain, but you have to be really truly in there. And if you have vocation, then you will be doing the work, because that's what vocation is feeding off. It's this evolution of yourself and how you go forward. So I think that that's what it is. It's to really seek, and today it's fantastic because we didn't have this when I started, well, I had the internet and all of that, but I had Witchvox, goodness gracious, just disappeared. But we need somebody to do something similar. But I think that it's very interesting today. We're living in very interesting times. It's modern times. People have tools at their disposal that we didn't really have at the time. Facebook is booming, all of these things. Um, One of the things that it's really horrible about this, it's that there is too much. So now there's delusion and there is illusion and, there's all of these things that this is, I think, the only thing that we have to be careful about, delusion and illusion of the offer, because the offer is so big. There's so much. Be selective. Know what you are in your heart, and then you will know exactly how to follow the thread. And then just follow that thread, and then you will eventually find your point of light. That's all I will say.
No, no, that's wonderful. And I think today, in our instant society, the sort of tenacity is sort of, I wouldn't say it's lost, but it often gets sort of like people get disenchanted very easily if they don't receive an answer immediately. So it's good to
Yeah.
hear that. And I know for myself, when something sings to your soul, so to speak, and no matter which way you turn, and it's always there, it's just like, okay, I'm just going to have to surrender to it and succumb and
Yes. Yeah.
walk the
Yeah.
path, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up, how do people find you? You've mentioned the internet. Now you have a number of Instagram accounts, because you've got one for your coven, the Coven Tomar in Portugal. You've got one for yourself as well. You're on Facebook, and you have Facebook groups as well for are these open to seekers? Your Facebook group for the other Alexandrian Facebook group, is it open for seekers as well? So it's a good place for
Yeah.
people to go to, and to get copies of your book and Jamal's book as well. That's from Red Fawn Press. So is there anything else that you have? And you also do a podcast as
Yeah.
well. So there's so much things happening, Karagan. It's just like,
Yes.
so where can people find your podcasts? Where's that available?
Well, the podcast has and people prefer sometimes YouTube as well, because, we don't appear in YouTube live, but meaning live with video like we are here. But we do have the audio in YouTube, and people sometimes love that. They love the YouTube because it's more accessible. Everyone can know what it is and where it is and how to go about it. So we did YouTube for Coven's sake. And it's just two priests talking. It's just me and Michael. And then we eventually will get a priestess, that it's a veiled priestess or not, coming in. And we have some guests as well. So this is one of the things that I do. It's to put in more than one platform, because then people can actually go and access it. The other place where we have the For Covenant's Sake is Spotify, and also in Apple Podcast. So we have Apple, and for people that have iPhones, it's easier. And then Spotify for people who do not have Apple. So we have in all of these places, we have a syndicate of the podcast so that people can actually listen to it. On Instagram, I have, yes, an account for myself, but I have one for the Coven. Yes, you're right, Coven of Tomar. We have one that it's Alexandrian Tradition Portugal, which is just a channel for things that are happening in Portugal, and we can actually, talk about it. I have the other Alexandrian group, which is a group that I started. I had a lot of groups in Facebook, but this one is the most recent one, and I don't have anything else. I have two groups of the other Alexandrian group, one for seekers only and initiates, and then another one only for initiates. So I have that one as well. And then that's it. I think that's the whole the whole. And then of course, redfawnpress.com. for the books that we do, and we publish the Jamal's book and my book as well. So that's also there. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So I'll put all the links below so people can check them out. And if people say are living in Portugal or that part of Europe, are they able to approach you if they're interested in learning
Yes,
more
of
about the
course.
Alexander?
Yes, of course. One of the things that we do, and we started just one time, we just did one so far, but we'll do more, is the virtual Alexandrian soiree. For those of you who do not know what an Alexandrian soiree is, it's an opportunity for seekers to come and ask questions and have answers. So this is the perfect outlet for people to actually come and have a chat with some Alexandrian initiates. And we do this, they have been doing this for forever, for decades, Alex and Maxine. And we continued doing that as well. We did a first Alexandrian soiree in America, and then we continued doing it here in Portugal as well, in presence, which means with people that goes to a place, and then we just have some wine and we'll just be there chatting. And also virtually. So we did once the virtual Alexandrian soiree. We're going to do more. We're going to do it very seldomly, so people have to really wait for it. But we will announce it on the groups or in my profile on Facebook so that people can then register for the event. So everyone is welcome, but they do have to register. So keep an eye out for the virtual Alexandrian soiree.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for your time chatting with me. And I think that's about it. So, Karagan, thank you
Well, thank you
once
so much.
again for discussing the magic in you.
Thank you. It was lovely to see you with Isis right behind you and Sekhmet as well. I mean, you have an array of beautiful books also there, which I hope that you talk about them. Call of the Gods and The Dark Goddess and all of those fabulous books. Yeah. So, yes, it's wonderful. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Francis.
Wonderful, Karagan. And for anybody who's watching this, please check out all Karagan's links below. So, thank you.